All right, guys. Let's get to chapter 8, finish it up, and then we're going to move on to just the worksheets for chapter 9 and 10. And then we're going to move on to copyright law and maybe watch a couple of movies and a few things like that. All right, so let's get to the end of chapter 8. There's the second half of it. Okay, and these are, right, so I spend the first half of chapter 8 telling you that you have to have consideration for it to be an enforceable agreement. And now we go to this, which is enforceable agreements without consideration. Okay, so there are some exceptions. All right, in most situations, a contract is invalid if it does not include consideration. However, there are some agreements in which the requirement of consideration is eliminated. Some courts have chosen to eliminate the requirement consideration in certain kinds of agreements. Some differ in the rules they apply to promises made in such agreements. We can, however, look at some of the more common agreements that fall into this category. All right, so the first one is a promise under seal. Basically, a seal is a mark or impression placed on a written contract indicating that the instrument was executed and accepted in a formal manner. Okay, then we have promises after discharge in bankruptcy. So what happens is if you claim bankruptcy, you are discharged from the responsibility to pay your debts, okay? But sometimes people will come into money and decide that, morally they want to pay their debts. So you can voluntarily pay the debts that have been discharged in bankruptcy. Couple things you have to do. Court hearing must be held when the reaffirmation of the debt is intended. Okay? In the hearing, the debtor must be informed of the legal consequences of assuming the debt. Okay? So you have to be told that if you assume this debt, it's now back on the books and is no longer discharged. Okay? So you must be reminded that this is optional. Okay? Under most state laws, no consideration is needed to be provided in support of the reformation. Because you're agreeing to come back and pay this, there's no reason to have consideration here. Right? Instead, the reaffirmation must be supported by contractual support. Okay, debts barred by statute of limitations. Okay, statute of limitation establishes the time frame with a party is allowed to bring suit. Different states set different time limits for the collection of a debt. Such variations run from 3 to 10 years. Okay, promises enforced by promissory estoppel. Okay, promise made may be enforceable without consideration. Promissory means containing or consisting of a promise. Estoppel means restraint on a person to prevent him from contradicting a previous act. All right. So this is used to prevent injustice when a person changes his position significantly in reliance on another person's promise and the promise is not fulfilled. The court will stop the person who made the promise from claiming that there was no consideration. Right? So I promised to do something for you, right? And then I don't do it, but you've made decisions based on that promise, and then I say, well, there was no consideration, so you don't have all the elements of a contract. In this case, the court could consider a stop. Okay? There are 3 elements. The promise must be made to bring about action or forbearance by another person who gave no consideration. The party that gave no consideration must have relied upon the promise and changed his or her position in a significant way. Injustice can be avoided only by enforcing the promise. Okay? Option. An option is when an offeree will give consideration to an offer in exchange for a promise from the offerer to keep it opened for a specific period of time. Under the UCC, an exception exists to the ruling requiring consideration for an option. When a merchant makes a written offer stating the period of time during which an offer will remain open, consideration is not needed. So if I ask you for give me a week, You have to give me a decision in a week. There's no need for consideration there. The offer, which is called a firm offer or irrevocable offer, must be signed by the offeror. The time permitted for accepting cannot exceed 3 months. Unenforceable agreements without consideration. So we've looked at promises without consideration that are allowed by statute or because courts, in the interest of fairness or justice, found it appropriate to do so. Illusory promises. For a binding contract to be formed, both parties must be under an obligation to do something. Some contracts are illusory. They appear at first glance to be contracts, but on further scrutiny are revealed to be hollow. Future gifts. A person promises to bestow a gift at some future time or in a will. Past consideration. The act of giving or exchange benefits and detriments must occur when a contract is made. Consideration that took place in the past or that is given for something that has already been done is not regarded as legal by the courts. Pre-existing duties. If a person is already under a legal obligation to do something, a promise to do the same thing is not consideration. These obligations are called pre-existing duties. Police officers, firefighters like Michael and Dan, and other political officials who might promise special services in exchange for monetary or other awards are doing what is actually their job would also be affected by the rule. Police officer promises to keep an eye on your store, right? That's his job. Okay? Promise to attend a social engagement. A contract consists of agreements, but not all agreements must consist of contracts. An agreement to meet a friend for lunch or another social agreement would not be legally binding agreement because a friend has given you nothing in exchange for the promise. As a result, that agreement lacks consideration. All right, so that is the end of chapter 8, right? I will put up the answer sheets for chapter 8 tomorrow, and then I will put up the answer sheets for chapter 9 and 10 later this week. So your assignment for this part is to give me 4 examples again of consideration. So what I'd like is 2 for the first part. Let's just go with 4 for the last part, without consideration. Agreements without consideration. Okay? Have a good day, boys and girls.